Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, God says, so that there may be food in my house, and test me now. You see those three words? Test me now. This is the only place I know at all, where God says, test me. Test me. Prove me, he says. I had a mother and daddy who proved God many, many times. God never just opened up heaven and gave them $1 million. He didn't do that. And he might not ever do it to you. But you know what? He met every need they had. I wasn't a wealthy kid. My dad was a plumber. I'm a PK, plumber's kid. Just, 4 kids. But you know what? I'm wealthy in many other ways because I had a mom and dad to whom God was very real. Prove me now. Abraham, we saw, gave God the 10th, and it grew him and grew him and grew him until one day God said, I want everything you got. I want the most precious thing you got. I want Isaac. Bring him up to Mount Moriah and offer him as a sacrifice. There's no record that Abraham argued with God, debated with God. In fact, on the way up the mountain, Isaac said, he said, Daddy, we got the fire, we got the wood and the fire. Where's the sacrifice? And Abraham made the greatest response. He turned to his son and said, Son, God will provide. And I want to tell you something. Until you learn to walk with God by faith, you will not be able to look into the eyes of your kids and say, God will provide. And one of the greatest things you could ever do for your children is to teach them that principle. Our faith is not in the government. Our faith is not in our job. Our faith is not in my good health. Our faith is in God. It is in God. And our children need to know God will provide. And God says right here, prove me now. Prove me now. If I won't open the windows of heaven and pour out for you a blessing until it overflows, wow. And you know what? Again, my daddy believed in tithing and practiced it. And again, he never became a millionaire. But I want to tell you something. Listen to this. We started this church in his living room. My mom and dad, my wife and I, and another friend, 5 of us. 1 year later, we invited Dr. Elmer Towns, who came and dedicated this building a year ago. We invited him to come and speak at our first stewardship banquet. 27 people were there. Our first 5 and 22 more. And Elmer Towns spoke on those 3 words. I'll never forget it. He spoke on, prove me now. Prove me now. I never forget it. A little group of people in Broadicke's restaurant on 13th and South Street, 27 people heard a message about prove me now. And you know what? Listen to me. God has opened the windows of heaven and poured out a blessing. Because those people did prove God. They stepped up and made a step of faith. I want you to know, listen to this. You can prove God in 2010 in your own personal life and here as a church. Can you imagine? I mean, over 37 years, God has been blessing this church. God has been hearing our prayers. Totally indigenous church. Not a part of a conference or anything. Just whatever our people give every week, and that's it. And yet God has blessed. We have seen lives changed, and we have seen people come to Jesus Christ. And we have seen families changed, and God is continuing to work in a miraculous way. Do you know what? I think He made my mother and dad millionaires. He honored their faith. Look what He says. I'll open the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing till it overflows. Can you imagine what God could do in your life and in your church if all of us would step up and take a step of faith and be a partner with God in 2010? I challenge you for your sake to step up and say, I'm going to put God first. The tithe is the Lord's. That's an eternal principle. It is holy. It is holy. I heard about a preacher who preached on this one time. And in his church, after they took the offering, they laid the offering plates on the table in the front. He stepped down and walked over to the offering plates and reached in there and took some of the money, stuck it in his pocket. And a little boy in the front row, his eyes got as big as saucers. And he said, what's wrong, son? And he said, you took some of God's money. And the preacher put it back, and he said, that's what some of you are doing. You are robbing God. The tithe is not yours. It is the Lord's.